So, what is everything really made of? I mean, really, truly, at the bottom of it all. It's one of the biggest, oldest questions humanity has ever asked, one that has kept thinkers up at night for thousands of years. In this explainer, we're going to go on an incredible 2,500-year journey to track down the answer. But before we dive in, just take a second. If you had to boil down all of reality, I'm talking stars, planets, this screen, you, me, everything, to just one single fundamental thing, what would it be? It's a massive question, right? But just thinking about it puts you in the exact same frame of mind as the very first philosophers who started this whole incredible quest. All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off in ancient Greece. This is a time when people started moving away from explaining the world with myths and gods, and they began using something totally revolutionary: pure human reason. I mean, the intellectual ambition here is just mind-blowing. It all starts with Thales, who comes up with a surprisingly simple and elegant answer. Everything is made of water. Makes sense, right? But his student, Anaximander, he pushed back. He argued the source has to be something more abstract, something boundless. Then Heraclitus comes along and flips the whole thing on its head, suggesting that the fundamental principle isn't a thing at all, but a process, constant, endless change. And finally, Democritus lands on an idea that would echo for centuries, that everything is made of tiny, indivisible particles he called atoms. This big idea was called atomism. It comes from the Greek word atomos, which literally means uncuttable. And the logic behind it was just beautiful in its simplicity. Democritus basically argued that you can't just keep cutting something in half forever and ever. Logically, you have to eventually get to a fundamental piece that just can't be cut anymore. And that piece, that's the atom. For him, the entire universe was just these little atoms bumping around in empty space. I mean, how modern is that for 400 BCE? But here's the crazy part. As brilliant as atomism was, the idea was basically lost to history for centuries. So how on earth did this ancient concept make such a dramatic comeback and completely change the course of science forever? For over 1,500 years, that's a long time, the atom went into exile. Thinkers like Aristotle had other ideas about the world, and those ideas became way more influential. The atom became this fringe concept, a kind of historical fun fact, but not a serious scientific tool. It was a long, quiet period for our little uncuttable particle. So what brought the atom back from the dead? Well, it was a massive shift in how we even think about knowledge. For centuries, the goal, championed by guys like René Descartes, was to build truth from pure logic. What you could prove with absolute certainty, just sitting in a chair and thinking. But a new way of knowing was taking over, building knowledge not from certainty, but from probability, based on actual evidence. And that right there, that became the engine of modern science. And this slide right here perfectly shows that new method in action. See, John Dalton wasn't just thinking in an armchair. He started with observation. You take a pure substance like water, it's always got hydrogen and oxygen in it. Then came the measurement. Those elements always combine in the exact same fixed proportions. And all that evidence led him to this powerful conclusion. The best way to explain this is if each element is made of a unique ultimate particle, an atom, and they combine in simple whole number ratios. He had found real, hard, experimental evidence for an idea from ancient Greece. So the atom was back, and this time it was backed by evidence. For a little while, it really seems like we'd found it, the final fundamental building block of reality. But the universe, as it always does, had a pretty big surprise waiting for us. This is the moment where our 2,000-year-old story gets a major plot twist. The very definition of the atom, its name, was about to be challenged. What if the thing that literally means uncuttable could, actually be cut? And yep, that's exactly what happened. A series of incredible experiments revealed that atoms weren't these solid, indivisible little balls at all. They had a structure. They were made of even smaller parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. The fundamental building block had just been broken wide open. This kind of scientific revolution actually has a name. It's called a paradigm shift. The term was made famous by the historian Thomas Kuhn, and it describes a moment when the entire framework of a science just changes. You're not just discovering a new island on the map, you're realizing the world isn't flat. The discovery of subatomic particles, that was a paradigm shift of epic proportions. And believe it or not, the rabbit hole went even deeper. By the mid-20th century, physicists realized that even protons and neutrons weren't fundamental. Nope, they were made of even smaller things called quarks. And the name itself is a fantastic little story. The physicist Murray Gell-Mann plucked it from this famously difficult novel, Finnegan's Wake, because a line about the number 3 matched his theory perfectly. So, we've gone from water to atoms to quarks. That's the what of our story. But the how we actually figured all this out, is just as important. Let's take a look at the philosophical engine that's been driving this whole incredible journey. Okay, this distinction right here is absolutely crucial. On one hand, you have deduction. This gives you rock-solid certainty. Think, all dogs bark, Fido is a dog, therefore Fido barks. If the first two parts are true, the conclusion has to be true. But science runs on induction. It's more like this. Every swan I've ever seen in my life is white. Therefore, all swans are probably white. You see the difference? You're moving from specific things you've seen to a probable general rule. It's incredibly powerful, but it never, ever gives you 100% certainty. The philosopher Bertrand Russell just nailed it with this quote, "You can't prove that induction works by using induction. That's just circular reasoning. It's a fundamental principle we just have to accept as a starting point to do any science at all. It's the leap of faith that lets us believe the patterns we see today will still be there tomorrow. And without it, science as we know it would just be impossible." And this brings us right up to today. While the scientific method, which runs on induction, has given us quarks and the standard model of physics, that original philosophical desire for a simple, logical explanation for everything, that ancient Greek impulse, well, that's still very much alive and well. Yeah, even with all our mind-bendingly complex physics, that old question still hangs in the air. Can we explain the entire universe from just a few simple, observable rules? It's a drive that connects thinkers today directly back to Thales and Democritus, thousands of years ago. And what's really interesting is that this impulse isn't just happening in billion-dollar particle colliders. Take a look at something like the action/reaction theory. Now, to be clear, this is not mainstream physics, but it's a perfect example of that same philosophical drive. It tries to explain the universe using really simple, observable principles, like nothing happens without movement, and change happens when opposites meet. It's a powerful reminder that that ancient quest for a simple, fundamental answer is still going strong. And that leaves us with one final big thought. We've gone from thinking everything was water, to uncuttable atoms, to a whole universe of quarks governed by quantum mechanics. And at each step, it probably felt like the final answer. So the question for us is this. Which of our fundamental truths today are actually just another step on the journey? What parts of our current map of reality are just waiting for the next great paradigm shift?